I'd never been the type to question things. Life was life, and you took it as it came. Sure, there were small things that fell a little off now and then, just little ripples in the calm water, you know? But I didn't think much of it. I was busy. Work, kids, bills. There wasn't much time left for anything else, let alone suspicion. My wife, Marissa, was the kind of person who always seemed to have everything in place. She kept the house running, the kids fed and cared for, and as far as I knew, we were good. There was no reason for me to suspect anything, except, of course, that one afternoon. It wasn't planned. I'd taken an early day off, hoping to surprise Marissa with a little time together. The house was quiet as I pulled into the driveway. No kids running around. No sounds of the TV blasting or dishes clinking. I figured she was either reading or working in the garden, as she often did when she had a moment to herself. But as I opened the front door, I froze. There they were, Marissa and the grocery delivery man, standing in the doorway, wrapped in each other's arms. It wasn't just a hug. No, it was something deeper, more intimate than a casual greeting, more desperate than a friendly embrace. I don't know how long I stood there, staring, before the silence hit me like a wall. They both pulled away quickly when they saw me, like deer caught in headlights. The delivery man cleared his throat awkwardly, his eyes darting to the ground as he mumbled something about the groceries being on the porch, ready to be put away. But I wasn't listening to him. I was looking at Marissa. I could feel my hands balling into fists at my sides, but I didn't speak. I couldn't find the words at first. What could I say? Could I even say anything at all? Marissa's eyes were wide with a mix of surprise and something else. Guilt, maybe. She moved a step forward, but I took a step back. My mind was spinning, and I couldn't figure out what to make of the scene in front of me. "It's not what you think," she said, the words tumbling out quickly. I didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake. A mistake. That was the first thing she said. My stomach churned, but I didn't say anything. I could feel anger rising in me, thick and heavy, but I held it in. I didn't need to yell. The look on her face, the way she was avoiding eye contact, the way she fidgeted with her hands, spoke louder than any words she could have said. The delivery man was still standing there, looking like he wanted to sink into the floor. I hadn't even noticed him leave, but he must have done so while I was trying to process what I had seen. Marissa's attention was on me now, and I could feel her guilt trying to form into words, but none of them were good enough. There wasn't anything that could explain it away. I should have walked away then, but I stayed. I needed to understand what had happened, why this had happened. How had we gone from being a family, happy enough in our routine, to this? But instead of giving me answers, all I got were more excuses. "It was a mistake," she said again, this time more softly. "Just one time. It meant nothing. One time. Just one time. How convenient." She didn't explain much more than that. The delivery man was apparently new to the area, and one thing led to another. She said it had never meant to go that far, that she hadn't been looking for something like that. But what did that even mean? She was standing there, right in front of me, telling me it didn't mean anything. I could feel my chest tightening. I couldn't think straight, couldn't make sense of anything she was saying. "A mistake," I muttered. "That's all it was?" She nodded, looking desperate. "Yes, a mistake. Please, just let me explain." But I didn't want to hear it. The words were starting to lose their meaning. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that, and it wasn't the first time I had heard it from someone, but hearing it from her made it different. It was like all those little things that hadn't felt right now suddenly made sense, but in the worst possible way. The delivery man was out of the picture by now, having left with the sound of his truck fading into the distance. I looked at the door. The groceries were still sitting out there on the porch, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her. She stepped closer to me again, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said. I didn't yell, but the command was firm. "I need space." The words had come out of my mouth without thinking, but they felt true. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I needed to understand what had just happened and why it had happened in the first place. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, but the damage was already done. I didn't want to hear her apologies anymore. They were hollow, meaningless now, echoing in the silence of our once peaceful home. I had no idea how long I stood there, just looking at her. Maybe it was minutes, maybe it was hours. Time seemed to stop when things like this happened. Marissa had started pacing around the room, her words coming faster, like she was trying to fill the space between us with excuses that didn't matter. She told me over and over how it had never been planned, how it had been a moment of weakness. I could feel the anger simmering inside of me, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. What was there to say? I could ask all the questions I wanted. How, why, when, but none of them would give me the answers I needed. I looked at her, trying to figure out who she was now. Who was this woman standing before me? The one who had thrown everything we'd built away for what? A mistake? I didn't know her anymore. The person I thought I had married, the one who cared about our family, who wanted to build a life with me, wasn't the person who had just hugged another man at our door. The reality of it hit me in waves, and every wave felt like a slap to the face. I didn't want to hurt you, she repeated, but it wasn't comforting. She wasn't even looking me in the eye anymore. She was looking anywhere but me, her hands wringing together, as though she was looking for something to hold on to. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand how easy she thought it was to sweep this under the rug, how casually she thought I would accept her pathetic explanation. I didn't ask for the details, though part of me wanted to know everything, when, where, how. But that wasn't going to fix anything, was it? Nothing she could say would change what I had just witnessed. It doesn't matter, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I wasn't angry, not yet. I didn't know what to feel. I was numb, and that felt worse than anything else. I didn't even want to look at her, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I thought I could trust you, I added, though it wasn't even a question. I wasn't asking for an answer anymore. What was the point? I swear to you, it meant nothing, she said, moving closer again, like she thought I'd be more inclined to listen if she closed the distance. But I didn't want her near me. I swear it. Then why didn't you tell me about it? Why didn't you just tell me it was a mistake the second it happened? I asked. It felt like a simple question, but I already knew the answer, because she didn't want to. She didn't care enough to be honest, not until I caught her red-handed. The words she was saying didn't matter. They were just empty promises meant to keep her safe, to preserve whatever dignity she had left. She stopped walking, standing there in front of me, looking like she might crumble right then and there. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered the image of her and that grocery man, their arms around each other like they belonged there. My hands clenched again, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I was too tired to fight. Tell me everything, I said, my voice quieter now but firm. I needed to understand what had happened. Maybe not for me, but for us. For the years we'd spent together. She owed me that much. She hesitated. I could see it in her face, the internal struggle as she tried to find the right words. It didn't mean anything, she said again, like it was the magic phrase that would somehow fix everything. I was lonely, and he was just there. He didn't mean anything to me. I swear. Her words felt hollow now, like they were being pulled from her without any conviction behind them. She wasn't convincing herself, so how could she convince me? I looked at her, my mind still racing, trying to piece everything together. I wanted to know why it had happened. I wanted to know why she had let it go this far, why she hadn't stopped herself. But the truth was, I didn't think she even knew. I didn't think she could explain it any better than I could explain why my heart felt like it was being torn out of my chest. It wasn't just the affair, though that was bad enough. It was the betrayal, the way she'd lied to me for so long, the way she'd acted like everything was fine when she knew deep down it wasn't. She had kept up appearances, put on a show for everyone but me. And I was the fool for not seeing it. I don't know what to say, she admitted after a long silence. I can't take it back. I wish I could. I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant to hurt you. I'm not going to forget this, I said, cutting her off before she could finish. I'm not just going to let it slide. It's not a mistake anymore. It's something else. Her face fell. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had no right to cry. Not after what she'd done. I wasn't going to comfort her. I wasn't going to pretend everything was going to be okay. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I couldn't look at her anymore. I turned away, needing to get out of the room, out of the house, out of this nightmare that had suddenly become my reality. But as I stepped toward the door, I heard her voice behind me, fragile and pleading. Please don't go. Don't walk away from me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I wasn't sure what I was walking toward, but I knew I couldn't stay there, not with her. Not after everything. I didn't go far, just to the driveway, where I leaned against the car and tried to gather my thoughts. The world felt wrong, like everything had shifted, and I wasn't sure where I fit anymore. Marissa's voice was still echoing in my mind. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. But those words weren't enough to put anything back in its place. There was no fixing this. I should have driven away, should have left right then and there, but I couldn't make myself move. I just stood there, staring at the empty street in front of me, trying to figure out what my next step would be. What did I do now? Where did I go from here? I stayed outside for what felt like an hour, but when I finally walked back to the front door, the house was still and silent. Marissa was nowhere to be seen. I opened the door slowly, half expecting her to be standing there, waiting for me to return, but the house felt cold, almost too quiet. I heard a faint sound coming from the kitchen, and as I made my way through the hallway, I saw her. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, staring down at the wood like she was waiting for it to give her some sort of answer. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her. She didn't hear me come in. I wanted to walk away again, but I didn't. I couldn't. The house was our life, and I needed to confront her, to figure out what had been going through her head, what had made her think it was okay to throw it all away. I stood there for what felt like an eternity before I spoke. So, you just want to sit here now? After everything? She didn't look up right away. I saw her shoulders tremble slightly as she tried to control her breathing. I don't know what you want me to say, she replied, her voice cracking. I told you what happened. I don't know why it happened. I don't know why I let it go that far. I just don't know. The honesty in her voice wasn't comforting, though. It didn't make anything better. I didn't want her explanations. I didn't want her to try to make it sound like she didn't know what she was doing. I wasn't stupid. You knew, I said, my voice low, but it felt like it was slicing through the air. You knew what you were doing. You knew it was wrong, and you still did it. She raised her eyes to meet mine, her gaze pleading, like she was begging me to understand. I was lonely, she said. You weren't there. You were always busy with work, always too tired, too wrapped up in everything else. I didn't know what to do. He was just there, and I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Her words were like a slow drip of poison, each one worse than the last. The delivery man was just there? That was her excuse? The idea of it made my blood boil. I wasn't blind. I wasn't naive. I knew we had our issues. But this wasn't just a lapse in judgment. This was something else entirely. You don't get to make excuses for this. I told her, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. This isn't just some misunderstanding. This isn't something we can just forget. You chose him. You chose to betray me. And for what? Some comfort? Some distraction? Her face twisted, and for a moment, I saw real regret, real shame, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo what had been done. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered again, as though that would make everything better. I don't care what you meant. I snapped, my anger rising again, sharp and unforgiving. What matters is what you did. And now I have to figure out what I'm supposed to do with that. What are we supposed to do with that? Marissa stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back with a loud scrape. She reached out to me, but I stepped back, not wanting her anywhere near me. I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. Please just give me a chance. We can fix this. We can work through it. I didn't know what to say to that. There is no fixing this. Not now. Not after everything. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said quietly, the words feeling heavier than I expected. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she took another step toward me. Please, I love you. You're the one I want. I know I messed up. I know I ruined everything, but I swear it was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Please, don't throw everything away. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't listen to her anymore. The guilt, the tears, the pleas, none of it mattered. She had made her choice. She had chosen him. And now, I had to deal with the aftermath. Just stop. I said, my voice firm this time. Just stop. I don't want to hear it anymore. She didn't say anything else. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. But I didn't care. I had to leave. I had to get out of there. I turned and walked toward the door again. I need space. I need time to figure this out, I said without looking back. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for leaving. I didn't feel like I was abandoning her. I was just walking away from the mess she had made. I needed to be alone to process all of this on my own terms. But as I closed the door behind me, the weight of it all crashed down on me, and I realized that no matter how much time I took, I might never be able to understand why she had done what she did. I didn't know where to go. I ended up at the nearest bar, walking in without a plan, without much thought at all. I wasn't really looking for comfort, but maybe I was looking for a distraction. I found an empty seat by the window and ordered a drink. It wasn't even noon yet, but it didn't matter. Time didn't feel real anymore. As I stared out the window, watching the cars go by, I felt numb. Like all of it, the last few years, the relationship, everything I thought I knew, was just some kind of illusion. There were so many questions left unanswered. So many things I didn't understand. I didn't get it. What had Marissa been thinking? What had pushed her to do something like that? Was it just a simple mistake? Or was there more to it? I took a long drink, trying to force the thoughts away, but they just kept creeping back in. I kept seeing her, the way she had been with him, how she'd hugged him, how she'd looked so comfortable, so at ease. That image wouldn't leave me. It gnawed at me, like I was trapped in a loop, unable to break free. I wasn't sure how long I sat there, lost in my own head, when I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I pulled it out, not really expecting much, but seeing Marissa's name on the screen made my stomach twist. I stared at it for a moment, the cold weight of indecision pressing down on me. Should I answer? Should I ignore it? What was there left to say? Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello. My voice came out a little sharper than I intended. Please, can we talk? Her voice was soft, almost pleading, and it made my stomach churn. I need to explain. I need you to understand. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but there was a part of me that didn't want to listen. I didn't want to hear her explanations, her excuses. But I couldn't just leave things hanging either. What's there to explain? I asked, my voice still cold. You made your choice. You went to him. You made this mess, not me. I never meant for it to happen. I swear, she insisted. I just didn't know what to do anymore. I felt so alone, and he was there, and enough. I cut her off. I don't want to hear it. You made your decision, and now I have to live with that. So stop calling me. Stop making excuses. It's over. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear her trying to hold back tears. But I didn't care. Not right then. I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. Please, just let me fix this, she pleaded again. I let out a long, frustrated breath, rubbing my forehead as the tension in my body grew. I don't know if I can let you fix anything. I don't know if I could trust you again. Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically feel the weight of her regret through the phone. But regret didn't change anything. Regret didn't undo the damage. And deep down, I knew that nothing she said could ever make this right. I need some time, I said, my voice firm. I can't deal with this right now. I'll wait, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, just please don't leave me. But I wasn't sure I could stay. I wasn't sure I wanted to. I hung up without another word, feeling the weight of it all settle in my chest. I had no idea what the next step was, or even if I wanted to take any step at all. The silence in the bar felt suffocating, like everything around me was holding its breath. I took another drink, trying to numb the thoughts, trying to block out the voice in my head that kept telling me I needed to fix this, that I should give her another chance. But I wasn't sure I could. As I left the bar, I felt like I was walking in a fog, my feet moving on their own, my mind too exhausted to think clearly. The city was louder now, people hustling by, cars honking, life going on as usual. But nothing felt normal. It all felt off, like I was standing on the outside of everything, watching it all unfold without any way to interact. I didn't know where I was going, but I found myself in front of the house again. My car was parked in the driveway, and the windows were dark. The silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. I didn't want to go back inside. I didn't want to face her, to have to talk to her again. I didn't know what I was supposed to say to make things right, or if anything could be fixed. But I had to face it eventually. I had to face her, face what we were now, whatever that was. There was no running away. There was no avoiding the mess she had created. But I didn't have the strength to walk in just yet. I sat there, in the car, staring at the house. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if I was ever going to feel like myself again, or if I had already lost that person. I don't know how long I sat there in the car, but eventually I knew I couldn't keep avoiding it. I couldn't just sit outside and pretend things were okay. There was no going back. I needed to face her, even if it was just to hear her beg again or to watch her squirm as she tried to explain herself. Part of me wanted to be done with it all, to walk away and never look back. But that wasn't an option. Not really. I opened the car door and stepped out, the cold air hitting me like a slap in the face. The house was still, unnervingly so. It was hard to reconcile the idea that everything inside was normal when my world felt anything but this was where I had to be. So I walked to the front door, my feet heavy, each step feeling like a choice I was making towards something I wasn't ready for. I rang the doorbell before I even realized I had. The sound echoed through the empty street, and for a moment, it felt like I was standing in a vacuum, waiting for something to shift, to break the silence. I didn't know what I expected, but as the door opened, I found Marissa standing there, eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked so different, so fragile. I didn't want to feel sorry for her, but it was hard not to. Her whole demeanor screamed regret, but that didn't change what she had done. It didn't change the fact that I had caught her in the act of betrayal. "You came back," she said, her voice shaky, almost in disbelief. "Thank you." I didn't answer right away. What was there to say? Was I supposed to thank her for making a fool of me? Thank her for ruining everything we had built? No. Instead, I just walked past her into the living room, sitting down on the couch, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for me to speak, but I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready to hear her explain herself again, or to listen to another round of apologies. Nothing she said could make this better. It didn't matter how sorry she was. She had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Marissa closed the door behind her and sat down next to me, too close, as though she thought proximity could somehow erase what had happened. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away, not wanting her touch. I couldn't bear it right then. "I know I hurt you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I know I broke everything, but please, I need you to understand. It wasn't planned. It wasn't like that. It was a mistake. I made a huge mistake." "You keep saying that," I said, my voice flat, "but I'm starting to think it wasn't a mistake at all. It wasn't just some slip-up. You didn't just fall into bed with him by accident. You chose to do this. You chose him." Her face fell, and I could see the guilt, the shame, written all over her. But that didn't change anything. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to just sweep it under the rug because she said the magic words, "I'm sorry." "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she pleaded. "I swear I never wanted to hurt you." But she already had. She'd hurt me in ways I didn't even know how to express. I wasn't sure if I wanted to listen to her excuses anymore. There were too many holes in her story, too many things that didn't add up, and I didn't trust her anymore. How could I? I got up from the couch and walked to the window, staring out at the street. It felt like everything in the world was moving, and yet here I was, stuck in this moment, unable to move forward or backward. The house felt suffocating, like it was closing in on me. How could we ever go back to what we had? How could I even think of trusting her again after everything? "I don't know what to do with this," I said quietly, not expecting her to hear me. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I want." She stood up and came over to me, but I didn't turn to face her. I couldn't. I couldn't let her see how much I was struggling with this, how much I was torn between wanting to move on and not knowing how. "Please," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Give me a chance. I'll do anything. I'll prove to you that it was a mistake. I'll make it right." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she could fix this, that we could somehow move past it. But every time I thought about what had happened, every time I remembered what I had seen, the images burned into my mind. It was too much. "I don't know if I can," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I could trust you again." Her face crumpled in pain, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But that moment passed quickly because the reality of the situation hit me again. She had done this. She had destroyed everything. And now, I had to pick up the pieces, even though I wasn't sure where to begin. "You don't have to forgive me right now," she said, almost desperately. Just don't walk away. Please, don't leave me. The desperation in her voice was almost too much. I could hear how badly she wanted me to say the words that would make everything better, but I couldn't. I couldn't lie to her, and I couldn't lie to myself. I don't know if I can stay, I said, the words coming out as cold and final as I could make them. She took a step back, her shoulders slumping, but she didn't say anything else. There was nothing else to say, nothing left to fix. And as I stood there, feeling the tension between us, I realized that the person I was before this moment, before everything had changed, was gone. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know who we were. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, I would have to figure out alone. The silence between us stretched on, unbearable. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. Each breath felt heavier than the last. Each thought more tangled than the one before. I could hear the clock ticking somewhere in the house, the sound almost mocking, reminding me of the time slipping away, of decisions that needed to be made and could no longer be postponed. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel Marissa's eyes on me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Not yet. I don't want to lose you, she said quietly after what felt like an eternity. Her voice was so small, so fragile, as though she were standing on the edge of something she couldn't come back from. Please don't do this. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, trying to think clearly. It wasn't easy. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, they were all still so fresh, so raw. And the worst part was, I didn't even know how to process it all. How do you go from being the man who trusted his wife with everything to being the man who couldn't even look at her without seeing her with him? I finally turned to face her, but my eyes didn't meet hers. They were fixed on the floor, on the carpet, on anything but the person who had shattered my world. I could feel the weight of her gaze, but I refused to let it move me. I couldn't. Not yet. You didn't just make a mistake, Marissa, I said, my voice low but steady. You chose him. You chose to betray me. And no matter how much you beg, no matter how many times you say you're sorry, that's something I'll never forget. She flinched but didn't argue. She had no defense for that. She couldn't pretend it was anything else. There was no way to minimize it, no way to excuse it. It was a choice, not an accident. And that's what hurt the most. The fact that she had made that choice, and worse, that she had kept making it day after day until I finally found out. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said again, but it was quieter this time, as though she knew her words were falling on deaf ears. It happened. The lack of accountability in her voice made me angry all over again. She was still minimizing it, still pretending it wasn't as bad as it was. But it was worse than she thought. It wasn't just the affair. It was the betrayal of everything we had worked for, of everything I had believed in. And every time she said, "It just happened," it was like she was trying to erase that truth, trying to rewrite it into something more comfortable for her. I don't know how many times I have to say it. I told her, my voice tight. You weren't just some accident. You didn't just slip up. You let this go on for weeks, months, I don't even know. And you thought you could hide it. You thought you could lie to me, and I wouldn't find out. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered, her voice trembling. I swear I didn't. I wasn't thinking. I was so stupid. And I'm so sorry. There was again, the apology. The same one I had heard so many times, the one I wasn't sure I could trust anymore. She sounded so sincere, but sincerity couldn't undo the damage she had done. It couldn't erase the image of her and him, standing in our doorway, arms wrapped around each other like they were the ones who belonged there, like they were the ones who had been in a real relationship. Not me. I shook my head. You keep saying you're sorry, but it's not enough. It's never going to be enough. I looked away again, back toward the window. It was getting darker outside, the sky turning to that deep shade of blue that always felt like the world was about to swallow you whole. But inside, it felt even darker, like there was no way out, no way to move forward. I don't know if I can stay here, I said, the words coming out more final than I intended. I wanted to say something else, to soften it, to give her some kind of hope, but I couldn't. I couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. I need space. I need to think. Marissa didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her hands at her sides, looking as lost as I felt. I couldn't tell if she was waiting for me to change my mind or if she was just too exhausted to argue. I didn't care either way. I didn't know her anything. "I'll leave," she said eventually, her voice barely audible. "If that's what you want. If you need me to go, I'll go. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. And I'll always be sorry." The door clicked softly behind her as she left. I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to. I couldn't shake the image of her with him, the way she had looked in his arms. I didn't know how to move past it. And even if I could, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The house felt emptier now. It felt like it was just me and the ghost of what had been. And then, just as I thought I might collapse from the weight of everything, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from an unknown number. The words were simple. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen either." For a moment, I just stared at the screen, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I didn't know what to make of it. But I knew one thing for sure. Things were far from over. The game had just changed, and I had no idea where it would take me. I didn't respond to the text right away. I didn't know what I wanted to say, or if I even wanted to say anything at all. For the first time in years, my world felt like it was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't have a clue how to grab hold of it again. What I just walked away from, what I just allowed to unravel in front of me. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into a void, unsure whether I should jump or turn back. The silence of the house was overwhelming. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint sound of the wind outside, but none of it made sense. How could everything have been so normal just a few days ago? How could I have been so blind? I walked to the kitchen, my mind still racing, my thoughts all tangled. I opened the fridge and stared at the food inside, but I didn't feel hungry. I didn't feel anything but this growing emptiness inside me. Nothing was the same. The life I had built, the routine I had relied on, it all felt like a distant memory now. Then I looked at my phone again. The message from the unknown number was still there, staring up at me from the screen, mocking me with its simplicity. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to feel. It was one thing to confront Marissa, to see the betrayal with my own eyes, but it was something else entirely to face the reality of it all. The affair, the lies, the complete disregard for everything we had built. I ran my fingers through my hair and sighed. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending like it was all going to magically fix itself. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I picked up the phone and sent a quick reply, something short and to the point. "I know what happened. I'm done." It wasn't a long message, but it was the most honest thing I had said in a while. There was no going back after this. I had been lied to, and the truth was too painful to ignore anymore. I put the phone down and walked out the back door, stepping into the cool evening air. The world was still turning, but everything felt different. Every step I took felt heavy, as though the weight of the decision I had made was pressing down on me. I wasn't sure if I felt relief or anger, but I knew that for the first time in a long while, I was free. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized that I had made it through the worst of it. The betrayal would always be there, a scar that would never fully heal. But I was no longer a man who had been deceived, no longer the one who had been kept in the dark. I had faced the truth, no matter how ugly it was, and I would rebuild. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I would find a way to move on. And in that moment, I didn't need to know anything more. I didn't need to chase her down or keep looking for answers that wouldn't change anything. What was done was done. The past was the past, and all I had left now was the future. The future, it didn't seem so dark after all.